Hello, good afternoon and welcome to BBC News. The Prime Minister has ordered an inquiry into the Contaminated Blood Scandal that left 2,400 people dead. There'll be a consultation with the families of those affected on what form the inquiry should take. The scandal involved haemophiliacs and other patients being infected with hepatitis C and HIV from blood products. The blood transfusions took place during the 1970s and 1980s. The blood products given to thousands of patients had been imported from abroad. A recent parliamentary report found around 7,500 patients were infected. Well, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has welcomed the inquiry, which he said should have the potential to trigger prosecutions.
I think we need a thoroughgoing inquiry into this. I pay huge tribute to Diana Johnson, one of our Labour MPs, for the huge amount of work she's done on this. 2,400 people have died as a result of this contaminated blood. It's caused unbelievable stress to many, many more people. It was obviously a serious systemic failure. I think we need the strongest possible inquiry that can, if necessary, lead to prosecution and actions as a result of it, but above all, get to the bottom of it. So a broad, public, inquisitive inquiry is very important. But I do think we should congratulate all those that have worked so hard to bring this about. It was in our manifesto, and I welcome the fact that it's now going to take place.
Well, earlier I spoke to Liz Carroll, the Chief Executive of the Haemophilia Society. She said the inquiry was good news for those affected who've campaigned tirelessly.
Of course, we're really pleased that this announcement has been made today, but really also relieved for the many, many people who were affected by this tragedy and the campaigners who've been working tirelessly for years. It's good news.
Diana Johnson, speaking in the Commons, was talking about a Hillsborough-style inquiry. Is that how you see this progressing from here?
The most important thing is that this inquiry really looks at the broad remit of what has happened to our community over many, many years. It needs to go back to the early days of the 1950s when infection through blood was first understood. It needs to involve the community in what happened to them then and what happened after their treatment and how they've been treated, as well as looking at how companies such as pharmaceutical companies were involved, government decisions. It needs to be a really broad remit that can compel witnesses to come and give evidence. That's never happened before.
Here we are in 2017. Here we were in the 70s and 80s. Why has it taken so long?
It's difficult to know why it's taken so long. I think more and more information comes to light. Recently, some documents were put into the National Archive which have enlightened the community a bit more about what has happened, and working together with the community that we support, people who were infected, we've been able to really work with MPs and other people to bring this about, and I think it's a really important moment for our community.
You mentioned recent documents. Is that what you understand Diana Johnson meaning when she talks about new evidence as she has?
I think that's some of it. There are also some things in people's medical evidence where in their medical notes they've been able to find some information, but there are still some documents that have been held back because of commercial reasons that haven't yet been released, and it's important this inquiry looks at those too.
You talked about the breadth of what you hope this inquiry will be, which inevitably means it could take a long time.
Yes.
Does that worry you at all?
The important thing is that this inquiry doesn't change the work that is going on to ensure that this community get the financial support that they need right now. So as long as this inquiry doesn't stop that process happening, I think, of course, people want something to happen quickly, but they also want it to be done well. So to have an inquiry that takes time, that is done thoroughly, will be better than something that is done really quickly.
And even though we're talking about events that date back several decades, you would argue that this could still make a huge difference to people's lives today.
Absolutely, there is no question about that. People's lives were devastated. Our community at the Haemophilia Society had a whole generation almost wiped out. It's unbelievable the number of people that this has affected. And those people who are living today with the severe grief of having lost someone they love is as raw today as it was the day that they lost someone. We have many people who are very sick, living in poverty, not really understanding what happened to them today, wanting to understand and know and feel confident that this will never happen again.
Liz Carroll of the Haemophilia Society. Well, a short time ago in the Commons, the Health Minister, Philip Dunn, gave his response.
Aware that there have been several calls for a full independent inquiry over the years. In addition to these reports, the Department of Health has worked to bring greater transparency to the events at the time. Many documents related to blood safety, covering the period from 1970 to 1995, have been published and are available on the National Archives website. These documents provide a comprehensive picture of events and decisions made, and many of them were included in the documents reviewed by the Penrose Inquiry. However, I recognise that for those affected, these steps do not go far enough to provide the answers that they want and to get to the truth of what happened. In light of these concerns, and of reports of new evidence and allegations of potential criminality, we think it is important to understand the extent of what is claimed and the wider issues that arise. I'm going to make some quick progress to get to the nub of the statement that I'm making. So, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to be able to confirm to the House that the government intends to call an inquiry into the events that led to so many people being infected with HIV and or hepatitis C through NHS-supplied blood and blood products.
Confirmation there in the Commons of the announcement of that inquiry. We can speak to Andy Evans, who is chairman of the Tainted Blood campaign, and he has been campaigning for an inquiry for the last 20 years. He's there via webcam from Worcestershire. Andy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Given the length of time you've been campaigning, I'm assuming this is a good day for you.
This is an incredible day for us, but we need to be cautiously celebrating this. We need to be absolutely clear that the terms of reference for this inquiry are right, and that we actually get to the truth and justice at the end of it.
Tell us about your circumstances. Why has this impacted upon your life so much?
Okay, I was infected with AIDS and hepatitis C and B when I was 5 years old, 35 years ago. My HIV infection led me to be diagnosed with full-blown AIDS when I was 16, and at that time there was no medication to speak of around, and so it was a huge struggle to survive for the next 4 or 5 years while medications came online. And ever since then, really, I've been able to maybe recover a little bit, but also to campaign for truth and justice in this scandal.
What sort of treatment were you able to receive when you were seriously ill, as you must have been?
The only treatments that were available at that time were drugs like AZT, and they'd come through very quickly through checking processes, and they didn't really know what they were doing with them. And so they were given out in extremely high doses, and the AZT itself was actually responsible for a lot of people being pushed over into full-blown AIDS, and the side effects were absolutely horrendous as well. So it was a case of that, and also managing the symptoms of infections and things, opportunistic infections that came along during that time.
And what of the treatment that you've had more recently? How effective has that proven to be?
For the HIV, the actual virus itself is under control now. I won't say that the treatment's completely side effect free, because they're not. It's still a struggle on a daily basis to try to live a healthy-ish and normal life. But also those of us with hepatitis C have had that to contend with as well, and that's a bit of a slow burning disease, and with a lot of people it can rear its head later on in life, and that's been the case with me as well. And go some horrendous treatment for that, as have many members of the campaign recently as well.
Against that backdrop, there you've been campaigning for 20 years. Take us back to where our conversation began and where your hopes are as regards the remit of this inquiry. What do you want to know that you don't know now?
What I want to know is who was responsible for the infections of 4,800 people with hepatitis C and 1,243 people with HIV. What I want to know is who was it, the decision to ignore the warnings that these products were infected and contaminated? And who was it that decided then to monitor patients, to not tell patients of their conditions, and then ultimately who decided to cover this scandal for 35 years?
Andy, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. Andy Evans there of the Tainted Blood campaign.